He saw 3 Irish sisters being sold by their father, took them home for his sons. Before we begin, let us know where you're listening from. After the story, rate it from 1 to 10. Now let's start. The winter had been harsh on the western shores of Ireland. Crops failed, livestock perished, and hunger became a cruel companion to many families. For Conall Ryan, a weathered farmer with 3 daughters and no sons, desperation had turned his heart cold as the frost that killed his fields. His wife long dead, and with no means to provide dowries or feed additional mouths, he made the decision that would forever alter the lives of his daughters, Dara, Aoife, and Bridget. The slave market at Dublin was bustling that spring morning. Norse traders had established this settlement decades ago, turning it into a hub for commerce, including the trade of human flesh. Conall led his daughters, bound at the wrists with rough hemp rope, their eyes downcast in shame and terror. Zephyr Johansson stood tall among the crowd of Norse traders and local merchants. Unlike many of his countrymen who came solely to raid and pillage, Zephyr was a respected merchant jarl who had built his wealth through trade routes stretching from his homeland in the fjords of Norway to the markets of Miklagard, Constantinople. His weathered face bore the lines of 40 winters, his beard more salt than pepper, yet his eyes remained as sharp as the Sikh's blade at his hip. What brought him to Dublin was not slaves, but timber for his shipbuilding ventures back home. 3 sons awaited his return, Erikr, Bjorn, and Halfdan, all unmarried and running his vast estate, while he secured materials for their expanding fleet. When Zephyr's gaze fell upon the 3 Irish sisters, something stirred in him that had lain dormant since his wife's passing 5 winters past. Not desire, for he was a man of honor despite what others thought of his kind, but recognition. In their scared yet dignified bearing, he saw his late wife Astrid, who had been taken from her Saxon home as a girl. The eldest, Dara Ryan, stood protectively before her younger sisters. Though trembling, her emerald eyes met Zephyr's with defiance that few would dare show in her position. Her auburn hair, partially covered by a modest linen veil, caught the morning light like fire. How much for the women? Zephyr approached Conall, speaking the crude mixture of Norse and Irish that served as the trading tongue. Conall named his price, his voice cracking with shame, yet hardened by necessity. 3 healthy girls, my lord. The eldest knows herb craft and weaving. The middle one can cook like none other, and the youngest has a voice that would make your warriors weep. Zephyr studied Dara's face. Though dirty from travel, her features were strong and proud. No trace of submission, even here at the slave block. Something rare and valuable, more so than any gold or silver. I'll take all 3, he said firmly, counting out silver coins into Conall's trembling palm. The father didn't meet his daughter's eyes as he turned away, shoulders hunched under the weight of his choice. Dara called out to him once, her voice breaking, but he never looked back. You'll be treated well, Zephyr told them in their language, surprising Dara. I have 3 sons. They need wives, not slaves. Dara's eyes widened. We are not chattel to be passed from one owner to another. No, he agreed. You are not. But this is your fate now. You can either come willingly to a home where you will be respected, or I can leave you to whoever else bids for you. Men who will not care for your dignity. Dara looked at her sisters, Aoife, barely 17, clutching Bridget, the youngest at 16. Their fate settled heavily on her 20 summers. We will go with you, she finally said. But know this, Norsemen, we are daughters of Ireland, and our spirits cannot be owned. Zephyr nodded, respecting her courage. I would expect nothing less. The journey north across the heaving sea was unlike anything the sisters had experienced. Though they had grown up hearing tales of the fearsome longships that brought death and destruction to Irish shores, they now found themselves aboard one, surrounded by bearded warriors whose language sounded like rocks crashing together. Dara spent the first days aboard the vessel named Sea Wolf, caring for her seasick sisters and avoiding the curious glances of the crew. Zephyr had given them a small section at the stern, partitioned with woolen blankets for privacy. He had also returned their personal items confiscated by their father, small tokens of their mother, including a silver brooch that Dara now clutched during sleepless nights. On the 4th day, when the winds calmed and the sisters had found their sea legs, Zephyr approached them as they sat huddled together on deck. We will reach my home in 3 more days if the winds favor us, he said, sitting on a wooden chest before them. I should tell you about my sons before you meet them. Dara raised her chin. Will we have any choice in who we marry? Zephyr's expression remained impassive. My eldest, Eric, is 25 winters. He is a shipbuilder like myself, with hands that can craft both beautiful vessels and fine carvings. Bjorn is my second, 23, and a farmer at heart. He tends our lands and livestock. Halfdan, my youngest at 21, is our trader, clever with numbers and languages. You didn't answer my question, Dara pressed. No woman in our lands is forced to marry against her will, Zephyr replied. That is not our way, despite what your priests might tell you. Aoife spoke up then, her voice soft but clear. We are Christians. Will you force us to worship your gods? Zephyr stroked his beard. Many in our settlement follow the old ways, but some have taken the white Christ. I care more for honor than which God receives our prayers. Brigid, always the most direct, asked, and if none of us wishes to marry your sons? At this, a rare smile crossed Zephyr's weathered face. Then I have purchased 3 very expensive housekeepers. After a pause, he added more seriously, you will have a year. Learn our ways, our language. If by next spring you wish to return to Ireland, I will take you myself. The sisters exchanged glances, surprised by this unexpected offer. Why would you do this? Dara asked suspiciously. Zephyr's eyes grew distant, looking beyond them to the horizon. My wife was taken as you were. A Saxon girl sold to pay her family's debts. She came to love our land and me, but the choice was always hers to make. He stood, adjusting his fur-lined cloak. Freedom cannot grow where it is forced, like flowers cannot bloom in frozen ground. As he walked away, Dara felt something shift inside her. Not trust, not yet, but perhaps the first crack in the wall of fear and hatred she had built against these Northmen. The Johansson homestead spread across a sheltered valley, nestled between towering pine forests and a fjord that stretched like a blue serpent toward the distant sea. Unlike the primitive dwelling Dara had imagined, Zephyr's longhouse was impressive, nearly 60 feet in length with intricately carved dragon heads adorning the gables and smoke rising from the central hearth through a hole in the pitched roof. Surrounding the main house were smaller buildings. A smithy where the ring of hammer on metal sounded, animal pens, storehouses, and what appeared to be a bathhouse with steam escaping its roof. It's enormous, Brigid whispered as they approached, women and children pausing in their work to stare at the newcomers. Remember your dignity, Dara murmured to her sisters. Whatever happens, we face it together. 3 men awaited them outside the longhouse, standing beside Zephyr's wife's sister Frida, who ran his household in his frequent absences. The family resemblance was unmistakable, all tall with broad shoulders, though each son had distinct features. Eric, the eldest, had his father's stern countenance, but with a full red beard and hair braided at the temples. His hands, as Zephyr had described, bore the calluses of his craft. Bjorn was the largest of the 3, with shoulders like a bear and a more open face, his blonde hair tied back simply. Halfdan was leaner, more watchful, with intelligent eyes that seemed to assess the sisters with careful consideration. The introductions were brief and awkward, with Frida stepping forward to guide the sisters into the longhouse. Come, you must be exhausted from your journey. Food first, then rest, then we will speak of what is to come. Inside, the longhouse was warm and smoky, with a central hearth running down its length. Wooden platforms lined the walls, covered with furs and woolen blankets, sleeping quarters for the extended household. At the far end stood a high seat, elaborately carved with runes and creatures from Norse tales. That night, after bathing in the steam house, a luxury Dara had never experienced, and changing into clean woolen dresses provided by Frida, the sisters sat together at the long table, picking at unfamiliar foods, smoked fish, dark bread, some kind of porridge with berries. They keep staring at us, Aoife whispered, noticing the glances from the sons seated across the hall. Let them stare, Dara replied. We are not here to entertain them. Brigid, always the most adaptable, was already mimicking Norse words she had heard, earning a smile from Halfdan, who corrected her pronunciation from across the table. Later, In the small side room Frida had prepared for them with fresh straw mattresses and warm blankets, the sisters finally spoke freely. "What do we do?" Aoife asked, brushing her dark hair. "Father sold us to barbarians." "They don't seem like barbarians," Bridget observed. "Did you see their bathhouse? And the carvings on everything? Even our church at home wasn't as beautiful as their doorposts." Dara sat cross-legged on her bed. "Don't be fooled by comforts, Bridget. These are the same people who burned our monasteries and killed our holy men." "Not these men specifically," Bridget countered. "And Zephyr offered to take us home in a year if we wish." "If we survive a year," Dara said darkly. Aoife placed a hand on Dara's arm. "What choice do we have but to make the best of this? We can't escape. We don't even know where we are." Dara sighed, the weight of responsibility heavy on her shoulders. "We learn. We watch. We stay together. And we never forget who we are, daughters of Ireland, not Norse wives." As they drifted to sleep, Dara's last thoughts were of the eldest son, Erikr, and the way his eyes had followed her throughout the evening, not with lust or ownership, but with something she couldn't quite name. Curiosity, perhaps, or challenge. Spring melted into summer, and with it, the sisters found themselves settling into rhythms of the Norse homestead. Frida proved a fair-minded teacher, showing them how to card wool, preserve fish, and bake the dense, hearty bread that sustained the household. She taught them Norse words, laughing good-naturedly at their mistakes. Dara found herself working alongside Erikr more often than she expected. His workshop stood near the water, where the frames of 2 vessels were taking shape under his guidance. At first, she merely brought him meals or messages from the house, but gradually, she found herself lingering, watching his hands transform raw wood into graceful curves. "You could help instead of staring," he said one afternoon, not looking up from the dragon head he was carving. His Norse was deliberate and slow, for her benefit. "I know nothing of ships," she replied in her improving Norse. "You know beauty," he countered, finally looking up. "Tell me if this looks right to you." Surprised by the request, Dara moved closer, examining the fierce yet elegant creature emerging from the wood. "The eye," she said after a moment. "It needs to see farther." Erikr considered her words, then nodded, making a small adjustment with his knife. "Better," he agreed. It became their pattern. Dara would bring food, Erikr would ask her opinion, and gradually, their conversations lengthened. She learned he had sailed to Ireland twice before, that he could recite poetry that made the hall fall silent on feast nights, that he had refused 3 potential marriage arrangements from good Norse families. "Why?" she asked one day, helping sand a smooth curve of wood. "They were not what I wanted," he answered simply. "And what do you want?" His blue eyes met hers steadily. "Someone who sees beyond the surface." Dara looked away first, uncomfortable with how her heart quickened. Meanwhile, Aoife had found unexpected purpose in the kitchens, where her talent for cooking earned respect from the household. Her Irish stews, adapted to Norse ingredients, became a favorite, particularly of Bjorn, who began bringing her special herbs and roots from his forest excursions. Bridget, true to her nature, adapted most quickly of all. Her facility with languages meant she was soon chattering in broken Norse, collecting stories and songs from everyone willing to share. Halfdan took particular interest in teaching her, exchanging Norse legends for Irish tales. By midsummer, when the days stretched endlessly and the settlement celebrated with bonfires and feasting, the lines between captives and hosts had blurred in unexpected ways. The Feast of Midsummer brought all neighboring farms together for celebration. Mead flowed freely, music filled the air, and for the first time, Dara found herself joining a Norse dance, her hand clasped in Erikr's as they moved around the fire. In the golden midnight light that never fully darkened, she saw him not as captor but as man, his smile transforming his serious face, his movements graceful despite his size. "You dance well for an Irish woman," he said, spinning her beneath his arm. "You dance poorly for a Norseman," she retorted, earning a bark of laughter. Later, as the celebration continued around them, he led her away from the noise, to a cliff overlooking the fjord where the water reflected the sky's amber glow. "Are you still planning to leave when the year ends?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. Dara wrapped her arms around herself, though the night was warm. "I don't know anymore," she admitted. This place, it's not what I expected. And what did you expect? Savages. Brutality. Darkness. She glanced at him. Not beauty or poetry or kindness. Erica moved closer, not touching her, but near enough that she could feel his warmth. We are not so different, your people and mine. We love, we fight, we build, we die. Your people raid our monasteries, kill our holy men. And Roman soldiers once did the same to your ancestors. Now you follow their god. His voice held no judgment, only observation. The world changes. People change. Dara turned to face him fully. Can centuries of hatred be so easily dismissed? Not easily, no. His hand rose, hesitating before lightly touching a strand of her hair that had escaped its braid. But perhaps hatred is not the only legacy we must honor. When his lips found hers, Dara knew she should pull away. Her people, her faith, her very identity demanded it. Instead, she found herself responding, her hands moving to his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palms. The kiss deepened, and with it came a terrifying realization. She was falling in love with the enemy of her people, the son of the man who had purchased her freedom, a worshiper of strange gods. She broke away suddenly, stepping back. I can't, she whispered. Erica didn't reach for her again, respecting the boundaries she created. Can't or won't. Both, she said, turning to hurry back to the celebration, to her sisters, to the safety of what she knew. But as summer ripened into harvest time, Dara found herself drawn again and again to Erica's workshop, to his quiet strength, to conversations that challenged and expanded her understanding of the world. She learned Norse history from his perspective, of farmers seeking land, of kings consolidating power, of trade routes that connected their northern world to places as distant as Arabia. In turn, she shared Irish stories, taught him phrases in her language, explained the teachings that had shaped her faith. They debated, sometimes heatedly, the merits of their different beliefs, neither converting but both expanding. Your Christ died for love, Erica observed one evening as they walked along the shore. Our Odin sacrificed himself to himself for knowledge. Perhaps they would understand each other better than their followers do. The thought was borderline blasphemous, yet Dara found herself considering it seriously. Perhaps, she conceded. Their hands found each other in the gathering dusk, fingers intertwining. This time, when he kissed her, she didn't pull away. Autumn painted the landscape in fiery colors that reminded Dara of home. The harvests had been bountiful, the storehouses filled for the coming winter. In the 9 months since their arrival, all three sisters had found unexpected connections in this strange northern land. Aoife and Bjorn's courtship had progressed openly, his gentle nature belying his imposing size. He had built her a small herb garden near the kitchen, bringing stones from the river to create raised beds where she grew plants from seeds he collected on his travels. Bridget and Halfdan shared a love of languages and stories, often sitting together in the evenings as he taught her to write Norse runes while she taught him the flowing script of Irish monks. Though youngest, Bridget had perhaps adapted most completely, even joining Frida in household rituals that honored the Norse gods, an act that troubled Dara deeply. You cannot abandon our faith, Dara scolded one evening after finding Bridget helping prepare offerings for the winter blot ceremony. I haven't abandoned anything, Bridget replied calmly. I pray to our God and respect their ways. Father Thomas always said God is everywhere, even where people don't recognize him. These are pagan rituals, Dara insisted. Bridget set down the herbs she was bundling. And what about you and Erica? Does your God approve of loving a heathen? The words struck Dara like a physical blow. She had no answer that wouldn't make her a hypocrite. That night, unable to sleep, Dara slipped out of the longhouse into the crisp autumn air. The moon hung low and full, illuminating the settlement in silver light. Her feet carried her to the small wooden cross she had erected behind the bathhouse, her private place of prayer. She knelt on the cold ground, fingers tracing the rough-hewn symbol. Lord, show me the path, she whispered. Am I betraying my people by loving him? Am I betraying you? He doesn't answer, does he? Erica's voice came softly from behind her. Dara didn't turn. Sometimes the answer is silence. Erica knelt beside her, respecting the space around her cross. My gods don't always answer either. Perhaps that's why men fight so much over religion. We're all shouting to be heard by powers that speak in whispers. Finally, she looked at him. What do we do, Eriker? Winter comes. When spring returns, my sisters and I must decide whether to stay or go. And what do you want? Part of me wants to stay, she admitted, the words almost painful. With you. But I am Irish. Christian. How can I turn my back on everything I am? Eriker reached for her hand, his calloused palm warm against her cold fingers. When I build a ship, I take trees that grew in different soils. I use metals mined from distant mountains. I add flax grown in fields far from here. None loses what it is by becoming part of something new. People aren't ships, she said, though his words resonated within her. No, he agreed. They're more adaptable. He pulled something from his tunic, a small wooden pendant on a leather cord. In the moonlight, she could see it was intricately carved. On one side, a Thor's hammer. On the other, a Christian cross. I made this for you, he said, placing it in her palm. Not to choose, but to honor both paths that brought you here. To me. Dara stared at the token, tears welling in her eyes. Such an object would be considered sacrilege by stern priests, yet in its craftsmanship, she saw only love and respect. You would let me keep my faith? She asked. I would never ask you to be less than all that you are, he replied. And perhaps, in time, we both might find new truths together. She closed her fingers around the pendant, then leaned forward to kiss him, not with passion but with profound tenderness. In that moment, beneath the vast northern sky, she found her answer. Winter descended with ferocity unknown in Ireland, turning the world white and confining the household largely indoors. The longhouse became a universe unto itself, smoky, crowded, alive with stories and work and the complex dynamics of a large extended family. For the sisters, it was a time of decision. Their year of promise was more than half complete, and by spring, they would need to choose: return to Ireland as Zephyr had promised, or remain in this northern land as wives, adopting a new life and identity. The winter solstice celebration brought matters to a head. The shortest day warranted the greatest feast, with all neighboring farms gathering at Zephyr's hall to share food, drink, and community against the darkness. As the mead flowed and the skald sang ancient tales of gods and heroes, Bjorn rose suddenly, calling for attention. Beside him, Aoife blushed deeply, her eyes downcast. Before all gathered here, Bjorn's voice boomed across the hall. I ask permission from Jarl Zephyr to take Aoife Ryan's daughter as my wife when spring returns. A murmur ran through the crowd. Dara watched her sister's face, seeing not fear or resignation, but genuine happiness. Zephyr stood from his high seat, his expression serious as he approached the couple. Aoife of Ireland, he addressed her directly. My son asks for your hand. What say you? All eyes turned to the middle sister. Aoife raised her chin, her voice clear despite her nervousness. I accept, with joy and free will. Cheers erupted throughout the hall. Zephyr clasped Bjorn's shoulder with obvious pride, then surprised everyone by embracing Aoife as a daughter. The celebration grew wilder, with more drink and dancing. Later, Dara found herself seated beside Frida near the hearth, watching Brigid teach Irish dance steps to a group of Norse youths, Halfdan among them. Your youngest sister has the soul of a bridge builder, Frida observed. She connects people without effort. She always has, Dara agreed, smiling as Brigid's laughter rang out across the hall. And you? Frida asked, her weathered face serious in the firelight. Will you stay and marry my nephew? Dara's hand went to the pendant she now wore beneath her dress. We haven't spoken formally of marriage. But you love him. It wasn't a question, and Dara didn't treat it as one. I do. Then what holds you back? Your faith. Frida's directness was typical of Norse women, something Dara had come to appreciate. Partly. And loyalty to my homeland. Frida nodded slowly. I understand loyalty. But consider this. Is it loyalty to a place or to people? Your father sold you. Here, you have found those who value you. The words, though harsh, carried truth Dara couldn't deny. There will always be those who see me as outsider, enemy. Yes, Frida agreed frankly. Just as there are Irish who would never accept Eriker. The question is not whether everyone approves, but whether you can build something strong enough to withstand disapproval. Across the hall, Dara's eyes found Eric, deep in conversation with a visiting trader. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up, his expression softening when their eyes met. "I think perhaps we can," Dara said quietly. The decision crystallized fully on a frigid midwinter night, when a neighboring farm's daughter struggled in childbirth. Dara, known now for her knowledge of healing herbs, was called to help. Erica insisted on accompanying her through the snowdrifts, carrying torches to light their way. In the small farmhouse, Dara found a young woman barely older than Bridget, exhausted from hours of labor with a baby positioned wrongly. Working through the night, using skills learned from her mother and knowledge gained from Frida, Dara managed to turn the child and ease its passage into the world. When the baby's cry finally pierced the tense atmosphere, Dara nearly collapsed from relief and exhaustion. Outside, as dawn broke over the snow-covered landscape, Erica waited patiently, having stood guard all night. "They will live," she told him, leaning gratefully against his solid warmth. Both mother and child. He wrapped his cloak around her shoulders. "You saved them. God saved them," she corrected automatically. "Through your hands," he countered. "Whichever God guided you, it was your knowledge and courage that delivered them." As they made their way home through the pristine snow, Dara realized something profound. She had referred to Zephyr's homestead as home. Not just a place she was staying, but home. And the thought of leaving it, leaving Erica, felt like contemplating the amputation of her own heart. "I want to stay," she said suddenly, stopping in her tracks. "When spring comes, I want to stay here. With you." Erica turned to her, his expression guarded, as if afraid to hope. "You're certain?" "As certain as I've ever been of anything." She reached for his hands. "I love you, Erica Zephyrsson. I love this land, harsh as it is. I can be Irish and still be your wife, can I not?" His face broke into a rare, full smile that transformed him. "You can be everything you are and more." He lifted her suddenly, spinning her in the snow until she laughed. "I will build us a house where both our gods are welcome. Our children will know both languages, both traditions." "Children," she teased, though the thought warmed her more than she expected. "Many children," he confirmed, setting her down gently. "Strong daughters like their mother. And thoughtful sons like their father," she added. He kissed her then, amid the vast whiteness, their breath mingling in clouds in the cold air. Dara felt as though something final had shifted into place, not an ending of her old self, but an expansion into something larger, more complex, and ultimately more true. Spring came at last, the world reawakening in a riot of green that reminded Dara painfully of Ireland. 1 year had passed since they had been brought to this northern shore, and true to his word, Zephyr called the sisters together. "The promise I made stands," he told them, seated in his high seat with the 3 women before him. "If any of you wishes to return to Ireland, I will take you myself when the trading season begins." The sisters exchanged glances, a silent communication born of shared blood and experience. "I will stay," Aoife said first. "Bjorn has asked for my hand, and I have accepted." "As will I," Bridget added. "Halfdan and I wish to marry at midsummer." All eyes turned to Dara, the eldest, who had been most resistant initially. "My home is here now," she said firmly. "With Eric, if he will have me." Zephyr's weathered face softened with what might have been relief. "Then it seems I have gained 3 daughters instead of losing 3 sons to distant marriages." He rose, placing a hand on each sister's head in turn. "May your lives here be long and fruitful, and may your children remember the courage of their mothers who bridged 2 worlds." The weddings were planned according to a mixture of traditions, Christian prayers offered alongside Norse rituals, Irish songs mingling with Norse sagas. Erica had indeed begun building a home for himself and Dara at the edge of the settlement, incorporating elements she had described from her childhood home in Ireland. On the eve of her wedding, Dara stood at the shore, watching the midnight sun cast gold across the fjord. She had come seeking a moment of solitude, of connection with the homeland she would likely never see again. "Are you having doubts?" Zephyr's voice came from behind her. "No," she answered honestly. "Just saying goodbye." He moved to stand beside her, looking out across the water. "Your father did you a great wrong," he said after a moment. "But perhaps, in the end, his action led you to where you were meant to be." Dara considered this. I've come to believe that God's hand guides even our darkest moments toward light, though we may not see it at the time. My gods would say the same of fate, Zephyr replied. Different words, perhaps the same truth. They stood in companionable silence until Zephyr spoke again. I have something for you. A wedding gift. He handed her a small pouch. Inside, Dara found 3 silver brooches of Irish design, identical to the one her mother had given her, which she now wore constantly. How did you? I sent Halfdan to Dublin with traders this winter. He found a silversmith who knew the pattern. Zephyr's eyes were kind. One for each sister. So you keep Ireland close to your hearts even as you make new homes here. Tears filled Dara's eyes. In this simple gift lay profound understanding. That embracing a new life didn't require abandoning the old. That she could be both Irish and wife to a Norseman. That cultures could blend without erasing identity. Thank you, she whispered, impulsively embracing the man who had bought her as property and ended up treating her as daughter. The following day, beneath a canopy of budding birch trees, Dara Ryan married Eiríkur Johannsson in a ceremony that honored both their traditions. She wore a crown of spring flowers in the Irish manner, but also the Thor's hammer and cross pendant he had carved for her. When they spoke their vows, first in Norse, then in Irish, Dara felt no division in her heart. The woman who had arrived on these shores as captive now stood as bridge between worlds. Her love for Eiríkur, neither diminished nor complicated by their different origins, but made richer through them. That night, as they lay together in their new home, Eiríkur's fingers traced the curve of her face in the dim light. Are you happy, wife? He asked softly. Dara smiled, drawing him closer. I am whole, she answered. And it was truth itself. In the years that followed, the sisters thrived in their adopted homeland. Children came, strong sons and daughters who grew up speaking both languages, hearing stories of both cultures, understanding themselves as heirs to a legacy of love that transcended ancient hatreds. Zephyr lived to see his grandchildren grow, teaching them shipbuilding and trading routes, but also respecting the Irish prayers their mothers taught them. The settlement gradually changed too, influenced by the sisters' presence, becoming a place where different traditions could coexist, where what had once been foreign became familiar. And when Christian missionaries eventually arrived from the south, they found not hostile heathens, but a community already familiar with their teachings through the Irish wives who had kept their faith while embracing a new home. Dara never returned to Ireland, though she spoke of it often to her children and grandchildren. The land of her birth remained alive in her stories, her songs, the patterns she wove into cloth, the prayers she whispered at dawn. But Norway became her home, its mountains and fjords, its midnight sun and northern lights, its harsh winters and glorious summers. And most of all, Eiríkur remained her heart's true north, the man whose love had shown her that the greatest journeys are not across oceans, but across the divisions we create between ourselves and others. In their love, ancient hatreds dissolved into something new, not forgetting the past, but transforming it into a future where children of both worlds could find belonging.